Okay, so there's three type of questions that um, just want to chat about quick. So one of them is, and it was on your homework, where say 3/4 of the students took maybe one pathway course to say get into a college level class. And so it doesn't say it, but if 3/4 go through one pathway, that means that there's a fourth, the rest of them had to choose kind of option two, right? So if this is option one and 3/4 of them chose option one, that means 1/4 had to choose option two. And so that, say that 3/4, these 3/4, say they had an 80% pass rate. So 80% of them passed this class, and maybe this one has a 90% pass rate for that class, but less people took it, only a fourth. And so if I want to know what fraction is from pathways one, remember to use a percent, you always multiply. So I take 80% of the 3/4. So I'm taking 80% of the 3/4. And remember to use a percent going forwards, we always multiply. Now, if you have a calculator, you could just take 0.8, turn it into a decimal, times 3/4, and just use your calculator. So if I use my calculator, I have 80% times 3, and I'm going to hit the fraction key, 3/4, and it gives me 0.6, and then I could, let's see, convert that to a fraction. So somewhere there's a fraction to decimal key. I just have to find it right here. Do you see it says F to D? So I could go that key, and then it converts it to a fraction for me. So that would be 3/5. The other thing I could do is do fractions myself. 80% is the same as 80 over 100. That's what it means in fraction form of, I'm taking a percent of 3/4. And again, a lot of times we can just cancel those zeros and know it's 8/10. And then I could reduce or multiply straight across and then simplify, or vice versa. 4 goes in there once, 4 goes in there twice. And let's see, 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in here, 5 times? So I get the same 3/5. And then I could do the same for the people that pass this way. I'm taking 90% of the 1/4 that went this pathway. Again, I could use my calculator. And I could just go ahead and say, and again, using a percent going forward, you multiply. So times 1, hit the fraction key right there. 1/4, enter. And then I get this decimal, and to convert that to a fraction, I hit shift and this fraction to decimal key. And that will go either direction. So decimal to fraction, fraction to decimal. And what do I get? 9/40. If I want to do that by hand, I could put this in fraction form, 90 over 100 times 1/4. And again, it's usually easy to divide by 10, cancel 0, scale it down. Doesn't look like 4 goes into anything here, so you multiply straight across, okay? And again, on the review video I made, we also did a problem similar to that. All right, another problem that there was a question on, and I know it's on your homework and also on the quiz, is say that I give you one endpoint. So say I give you an endpoint and say it's at 2, 6. And then instead of the other one, I give you the midpoint and say that that midpoint is at, oh, I don't know. I have no idea here. What do I want to put? -2, -2. And then I want to figure out the other endpoint, okay? And so that's kind of my question here. So I have a little piece of graph paper. It's a little wrinkled, but it'll be okay. All right, so the easiest thing I think on these is to graph these. So I'm just going to graph it. All right, and so 2, 6, so over 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is one of my endpoints. And then, so this is an end. And my midpoint is at -2, -2. So right there. So that's my mid. And again, I'm going to label it -2, -2. So the easiest thing is, you know that this is going to follow, right? And I could even use a ruler to do that. So I could draw it with a ruler, but for now I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to go 8 down. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 over. So 4, what is that, to the left? So I know the other one is going to have that same kind of angle. So I'm going to go down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. and then over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that should be my other endpoint, because if I keep that same momentum, so over, down 8, over 4, down 8, over 4, that should be the one I'm looking for. And I think I have a ruler somewhere. I did. It might be on the floor. I don't know where my ruler went. I should have grabbed it first. But, all right, I'm just going to use a note card for a ruler here then. So I'm going to connect this dot through there, and a ruler would work better, but all right, I'm being kind of a perfectionist here, but see if I can get that a little better. All right, it's a little bit better, but you can see how this distance is the same at that distance, and I kept it at the same angle because I went down 8 over 4, down 8 over 4. So I just have to read this guy off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like -6. And it looks like it's down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it looks like the answer is a -6, -10, because I kept it the same. Now, another way I'm going to check my answer, or if you don't like graphing, this is kind of another method you could use, is I know that this, I'm going to just call this other xy, okay, to give them a name. So I know that I have to average the 2 and the x to get my x coordinate, and I know I have to average the 6 and the y and average those to get the other one. And the good news is I know the answer. So I know when I'm done, the answer has to be -2, -2. So then you have to think. Now you could just guess and test, like 1 would be 3/2, no. 2 would be 4 divided by 2 is 2. And they keep getting bigger. If I shove in 6, sub in 6, 8, it's a +4. So I know that I need a negative here. But I actually know more than that, because I know that a -4 divided by 2 gives me a -2. Okay, so I know that to get a -2 when I divide by 2, I must have a -4. So what that means is I know that all of this has to equal a -4. So then I have to think like, oh, 2 plus what equals a -4? And it looks like that's probably going to be -6. So if I owe $6 and I have $2, I get a -4. If I divide by 2, I get this. So I'm feeling really good about that answer. All right, let's look over here. Again, I know the answer is a -2, so I just have to figure out what y is. Well, again, I could shove in, a 1. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. I could put in a 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. I could put in a 6. 12 divided by 2 is 6, and it keeps getting bigger. So again, I know this is negative. But I also know, again, more than that, I know that a -4 divided by 2, and again, it's just an accident that these are the same. That doesn't always happen. But I know I get a -2 over here, so I know a -4 divided by 2 is going to give that to me. So I know all of this has to equal that -4. So let's see, -6 would give me 0. So a -10 would give me that -4. And then, so I get a -4 divided by 2 is a -2. And again, the only reason those numerators match is because it just happened that our answer is -2, too. Or -2, -2. And notice I get the same answer thinking as, oops, where's my answer at? I better write my right answer here, sorry. This is, we know this, we're looking for this guy. So I know my endpoint is -6 and -10. So this is my midpoint. Right? And then this, the -6 that we get for x and the -10 we get for y, this is my other endpoint. And if we look at our graph, notice that matches up. That's exactly the same thing we got when we graph it. So you can either do it visually or you can do it more kind of with math. All right, the last question is kind of figuring out what % you need to average a certain grade. So say in a class you have an 80%, maybe you have a 60%, not so good, right? And then a 75%. And then on the last test, you're kind of hoping to get your grade up, okay? And say your goal is you really want to get an average of 80% in this class, right? You're like, ooh, I just want to get a B-. I don't want to fall into the C range, right? And so one way to think about this is steal from the rich and give to the poor. So I want to average 80. So this guy's 80. But the problem is neither of these are 80. So not only is this guy going to have to be 80, he's going to have to be higher than 80 to make these better. And so it's going to have to be an 80, but then this guy is going to need 20 points or 20% to go there. And this grade's going to need a 5. And so if I look at that, it looks like this person's going to have to get 105% on that last test. Now, I don't know if the teacher gives extra credit or not, but that might be a problem. The other way you could do this is to think about, okay, well, if every test is an 80, then that would be like having 320 points in the class. And then it looks like grade-wise, this person has gotten so far an 80, and oops, let's clear, an 80, a 60, and a 75. So it looks like they have 215, we'll say, points so far, and this is what they need. So if I subtract, then it looks like they need 105 on that last exam, okay? And again, there's more than one way to do pretty much everything in math. So let's do another example. Say they did 95 on the first test. So they did an ounce of prevention. They worked really hard to get their grade good to begin with. And then maybe they got an 85% the next test. Again, they're working hard. And maybe the third test, you know, just, I don't know, it wasn't their day. They thought it was hard and they got a 65. Now, lucky for them, they have a little ounce of prevention here. And again, let's say they want to get an 80%. So their goal is to get a B minus. And again, they have 4 exams. So you could have 3 exams, 5, whatever. So if I kind of do the Robin Hood method, they have some to give, which is awesome. All right. So I'm going to take, say, 5 away from this guy and give it to this guy and make it a 70%. And then it's like, oh, I could take another 10% away and give it to this guy. So that 95% really saved the day over here. Not only that, but they have above an 80 on this guy. So this guy has 5% that it can afford to give to this guy. And we want an average of 80. So notice this grade can actually be lower than an 80 because then this guy can become an 80 and give the 5 over here to make that an 80. So this person only needs a 75% on the last exam to average 80 because they, you know, they had a lot of prevention there. Another way to think about this is if you want an average of 80 and you have 4 exams, then you, in a sense, need to get 80 on all of them. Now, we know in real life you're not going to get 80 on all of them, some above, some below, whatever. But again, you can think of these as points. That would be 320 points if we, I know they're percents, but you can kind of think of them as like out of 100 points. Okay. So then I can look at the grades they really got, right? Because they really don't always get the same, right? It's just when you steal, they all make the same. So I can think about how many points they have so far. So I can look at the 95 and what, 85 and 65. And so it looks like they have 245 points so far. This is what they need. This is what they have. So then I could just subtract those. So I could take 320 minus, let's see what, the 245. And it looks like that they need 75 points, or in this case, 75%. Right? So again, understanding that average kind of means everything balances out. That is a great idea. The other thing is you can always guess and test. So if you hate both of these ideas, you can always guess and test. So say I have, what do we have? We have 95 and 85, and then what did we have? 65. And then we have one more that we don't know. And we know to average, we divide by 4. If we're not kind of thinking of the Robin Hood method, if we're thinking traditional. So what you can always do is you can just guess. You could be like, how about a 90? Is that enough? All right. Or is it too much? So you could take 95 plus 85 plus 65 plus 90, enter and get what? 335 divided by 4 to average it out. And that's an 83.75%. So that's too high, right? That they don't need to do that good. So I'm just going to guess an 80%. See what that does. So I have 95 plus 85 plus 65 plus 80. Enter to get the total. And then remember, to get a percent, you always divide, or an average, I'm sorry, we divide by the total. There's 4 and 81.25. And their goal, again, is just to get exactly 80%. So you could try 74, 75, 76, but you want to get exactly. And of course, we have a little insider knowledge here. So, but you know, you don't want to get 80.1, you want to get exactly 80. So I'm going to add up. This time I'm going to guess 75. 320. I'm going to divide by 4 to average out, and I get exactly 80%. So